Emily Parker stepped off the Greyhound bus with a single duffel bag slung over her shoulder and the quiet determination of someone who had already been underestimated too many times in life. The bus station in Norfolk buzzed with activity families. Hugging, young recruits rushing with papers clutched in sweaty hands, drill sergeants barking names from clipboards. She didn't flinch at the noise. Instead, she inhaled slowly, as if centering herself before walking into a storm. Emily had grown up in a small town in Ohio, a place where the biggest excitement came from Friday night football games and county fairs. Her father, a firefighter, had raised her after her mother passed when she was 12. He was a man of discipline, but also wisdom, and he taught her something that never left her. Panic never solves a problem. Calm does. That lesson became the quiet anchor of her life. But calmness wasn't always respected. Teachers accused her of being detached when she didn't rush through tests. Coaches benched her for seeming too relaxed in games. Friends drifted away because she wasn't easily rattled by drama. She became known for being lazy, though in truth, she was anything but. She simply refused to waste energy on things that didn't matter. The military, to most, seemed like an odd choice for Emily. Her father had been skeptical when she announced her decision. This isn't like school," he said one evening at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. "The military doesn't care if you're calm. They'll want fast, aggressive, loud. Are you ready for that?" She had looked him square in the eye, steady as always. "Dad, if there's one thing I know, it's how to stay steady when things get bad. Isn't that what soldiers need most?" He didn't argue further. He just nodded, pride flashing in his tired eyes, then proved them wrong. And now, here she was, stepping onto a naval training base in Virginia, about to begin the hardest months of her life. From the very first hour, Emily stood out, and not in a way that won her respect. The base erupted with activity, boots pounding pavement, sergeants screaming commands, whistles blaring. Recruits scrambled, sweat dripping, as they tried to keep pace with the brutal schedule. Emily followed directions without complaint, but she moved differently than the others. While they rushed in nervous bursts, she was deliberate, unhurried, conserving energy. By the second night, her unusual composure earned whispers. "Look at her, she doesn't even break a sweat. She's probably gonna quit. Bet she's not cut out for this." But it wasn't until the first combat simulation drill that her reputation truly began to form. The recruits were herded into a darkened training field. Spotlights flashed, sirens wailed, smoke grenades hissed, filling the air with choking clouds. Blanks cracked from mounted rifles, mimicking live fire. Recruits hit the ground, low crawling through mud, hearts pounding as instructors barked orders. "Emily?" She lay down, crossed her arms beneath her head, and closed her eyes. At first, the others thought she had been hit. A few recruits shouted her name. But when one rolled closer, he saw her chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of sleep. "You've got to be kidding me," the recruit hissed. Word spread fast. By the end of the exercise, Emily had a nickname, Sleeping Beauty. It wasn't said with humor. It was said with venom. The instructors weren't amused either. Sergeant Whitaker, a towering man with a booming voice, confronted her after the drill. "Parker," he roared, his face inches from hers. "What the hell was that? You think this is nap time? You think we're running a summer camp here?" Emily stood at attention, her expression calm. "No, Sergeant." "Then why in God's name were you sleeping during Lev fire training?" "They weren't Lev rounds, Sergeant," she replied, her voice level, respectful but unshaken. Murmurs rippled through the squad. No one dared answer Whitaker that way. He looked ready to explode, but Emily didn't flinch. "I'm here to learn, Sergeant," she continued. "I didn't feel fear. I thought conserving energy was more useful. The silence that followed was thick. Finally, Whitaker barked. Get out of my sight before I bury you in latrine duty. From then on, Emily became an anomaly in the eyes of everyone around her. She never looked rattled, never seemed tired. And yes, she kept sleeping during drills. When flashbangs went off, others covered their ears. Emily didn't stir. When sirens wailed at 3 a.m, she rolled onto her side, muttering softly before drifting back into slumber. When instructors unleashed their fury, she listened respectfully, nodded, and carried on, untouched by their rage. To her squad, this wasn't inspiring, it was infuriating. She doesn't care. 1 recruit complained after a brutal run. We're out here dying and she's acting like she's on vacation. She's dead weight, another snapped. If this were real combat, we'd all be screwed because of her. But Emily never fought back. She endured their words the way she endured the chaos around her with quiet resilience. She was used to being misunderstood. Yet, beneath that surface calm, there were cracks. At night, lying on her bunk, Emily sometimes stared at the ceiling, wondering if she had made a mistake. Maybe her father had been right. Maybe the military only valued noise, aggression, and speed. Maybe her quiet strength would never be recognized here. But every time doubt crept in, she remembered her father's voice. Prove them wrong. So she pressed on quietly, steadily, even as the ridicule sharpened. And then came the night that would change everything. The night when a Navy SEAL commander named Davis arrived at the base for an unannounced inspection. Emily didn't know it yet, but her strange way of moving through the world was about to be tested in a way that no drill sergeant could have imagined. Because Davis didn't see a lazy recruit. He saw something different. And all it would take was one order to reveal it. The next weeks carved reputations into the recruits like names etched into stone, and Emily Parker's was the strangest of all. Some were known as the strongest runners, others as the best marksmen. A few earned grudging respect for sheer toughness, those who crawled until their knees bled without complaint. But Emily? She became Sleeping Beauty. It wasn't just a joke anymore. It was a label that followed her everywhere. During morning runs, when recruits staggered under the weight of exhaustion, Emily jogged at the same steady rhythm, her breathing never ragged. She didn't push herself into the red zone, didn't sprint to prove a point. She simply kept pace as if the 5-mile run were a stroll through her hometown streets. Look at her, whispered one recruit, gritting his teeth as they ran side by side. Not even sweating. She thinks she's better than us. She won't last, another muttered, spitting into the dirt. She's soft. Just wait until it gets real. But Emily didn't respond. She ran the same way she did everything else, quietly, deliberately, conserving strength. The nickname grew sharper after another combat simulation. Instructors blasted sirens and pumped artificial smoke into the field. Recruits were ordered to drag heavy dummies across rough terrain, simulating wounded soldiers under fire. Most trained, their muscles trembling. Emily completed the task with precision, but when the smoke thickened, she crouched in a shadowy corner, resting her eyes for a moment while others scrambled. Unbelievable, one squad mate hissed. She's sleeping again. While we're busting our backs, she's taking a nap. They finished the drill 2 minutes behind schedule, and though Emily wasn't the cause, frustration landed squarely on her shoulders. By the time the squad returned to barracks, the muttering turned into confrontation. What's your deal, Parker? Snapped Rivera, a stocky recruit from Texas, his chest still heaving from exertion. You think this is a joke? Emily looked up from lacing her boots, her expression unreadable. No, she said simply. Then act like it, Rivera barked. We're carrying your dead weight every damn day. Others chimed in, voices sharp, echoing in the barracks. She's dragging us down. She doesn't even care. I bet she'll quit before graduation." Emily listened without flinching. She had heard versions of this before in high school sports, in college study groups, even at summer jobs. People mistook her calmness for indifference, her stillness for laziness. She knew arguing wouldn't change their minds. So she said nothing. That silence only fueled their anger. The instructors weren't much kinder. Sergeant Whitaker, still simmering from her nap during the first drill, began singling her out. "Parker, on your feet now," he bellowed one morning as recruits lined up for inspection. "Why do you look like you slept better than the rest of us?" "I did sleep well, Sergeant," Emily replied evenly. A ripple of laughter and groans ran through the formation. Whitaker's face reddened. "Drop and give me 50. He roared. Emily obeyed without complaint, lowering herself into the push-ups. Her form was perfect, her breathing steady, as if she could do 100 more without faltering. Whitaker leaned close as she worked. "You think calmness will save you in combat? You think the enemy cares how relaxed you are? You're gonna get yourself and everyone around you killed." Emily didn't look up. "No, Sergeant," she said, her voice even. "I think calmness will keep me alive." Her squad snickered nervously. Whitaker shook his head in disgust, barking for her to stand. Despite the ridicule, Emily performed well in every measurable way. Her shooting scores were solid. Her endurance never faltered. She could carry a full pack across miles of terrain without collapsing, but none of it mattered. To her squad mates, to the instructors, the image of her dozing during drills outweighed every achievement. And the nickname stuck harder. They whispered it during meals. They muttered it during training runs. Sometimes they said it loud enough for her to hear. Sleeping Beauty. One evening, Rivera cornered her in the mess hall. "You know why everyone hates you?" he demanded, his voice low but fierce. "It's not because you're calm. It's because you don't give a damn about the rest of us. We're a unit. And you're a liability." Emily set down her fork and looked at him. Her brown eyes were steady, unblinking. "You're wrong," she said quietly. Rivera laughed bitterly. "Am I? Then prove it. Show us you care. Show you can fight like the rest of us, not just nap while we cover for you." Emily didn't answer. She simply stood, cleared her tray, and walked out. That night, lying in her bunk while the others whispered, Emily stared at the ceiling again. She could feel the weight of their anger pressing down. She knew they misunderstood her, but she also knew she hadn't explained herself. And perhaps that was her fault. The truth was simple. She wasn't careless. She was conserving energy, keeping herself sharp. Her father had drilled that into her since childhood. Never waste your strength before the real fire starts. But explaining that to recruits who thrived on adrenaline and noise felt pointless. They wouldn't believe her until the truth proved itself. Still, the loneliness gnawed at her. She didn't want to be the outcast. She wanted to belong, to fight alongside them as equals. But belonging, she realized, would not come from words. It would come from action. When the time was right. And that time was closer than anyone knew. Because Commander Davis had arrived on base. The recruits didn't know it yet, but his eyes were already on Emily, while her squad mocked her for sleeping. Davis saw something they didn't. He wasn't measuring her against their noise. He was watching the one thing that made her different, her calmness, and soon, her reputation as Sleeping Beauty would collide with the harshest test yet, a moment when only she would rise steady while others broke apart. A breaking point came on a night designed to crush them. The recruits had just collapsed into their bunks after a 14-hour training day when the alarm shrieked. Red lights flashed through the barracks, sirens piercing their bones. Peer. Up. Field exercise. Move, move, move. Adrenaline exploded through the room. Boots hit the floor, straps snapped tight, helmets yanked on as instructors stormed in with the ferocity of wolves. Exhaustion vanished, replaced with sheer survival instinct. Except for Emily Parker. She rolled out of bed calmly, adjusted her gear with precise movements, and followed the others at her own pace. There was no rush in her body, no panic in her eyes. Minutes later, they were thrust into the training field, swallowed by darkness and chaos. Flares burst overhead, bathing the landscape in eerie light. Smoke grenades hissed, filling the air with choking clouds. Blanks rattled from mounted rifles, a deafening imitation of live fire. "Move, move, move!" Sergeant Whitaker's voice tore across the night. "Retrieve the wounded, secure the perimeter, and get it done in 20 minutes." The squad scattered, dragging heavy dummies across uneven terrain, their breaths ragged. Sweat stung eyes, muscles screamed, and lungs burned. Everyone scrambled with desperate energy. Everyone except Emily. She reached her assigned position, crouched, low, and then unbelievably folded into herself, laying her head against her pack. Within minutes, her breathing slowed, steady as a metronome. She was asleep. Her squad saw it almost immediately. "You've got to be kidding me," Rivera shouted, dragging a dummy past her. "She's napping again. We're out here dying, and she's asleep." Another recruit, Jacobs, cursed under his breath. "She's gonna cost us the whole damn mission." They pushed harder, fury fueling their movements. But despite their efforts, the squad missed the time requirement by nearly 3 minutes. The horn blared, signaling failure. Whitaker stormed. Toward them, his face thunderous. "Pathetic. You think the enemy's gonna give you 3 extra minutes? You think this is a game?" His voice dropped into a dangerous growl. "You don't deserve those uniforms." The recruits stood in shameful silence, sweat dripping, chests heaving. But Whitaker's eyes locked on Emily. "You," he barked. Parker, front and center. Emily rose, wiping mud from her hands. Her expression was calm, as always. "Care to explain why you were sleeping during combat?" Whitaker demanded, his voice slicing the air. The recruits shifted, waiting for her to crumble. Emily met his gaze evenly. "Sergeant, I didn't see panic as useful in that situation. My energy is better reserved for when it's necessary." The words dropped like a stone into water. Silence rippled outward. Whitaker's face turned crimson. "Reserved? Necessary?" He thundered. "You're a disgrace to this unit. While your squad carried the mission, you were napping like a toddler. You're not just weak. Parker, you're dangerous." The recruits muttered in agreement, their anger spilling over. "She doesn't care. She's dragging us all down. She's gonna get us killed." Emily stood in the center of the storm, unmoving. And then, from the shadows, another voice cut through the chaos. "That's enough." The tone was calm, commanding, and instantly silenced the field. All heads turned. A man stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, his uniform stripped of insignia, save for a single trident pin glinting faintly in the flare light. His presence carried weight, heavier than any shouted order. It was Commander Davis, a decorated Navy SEAL. Davis had arrived on base earlier that week for inspections. Few recruits had seen him up close, but his reputation traveled far. Stories painted him as relentless, sharp-eyed, a man who could spot weakness in an instant. Whitaker stiffened, saluting. "Sir." Davis raised a hand, silencing him. His gaze swept the recruits before settling on Emily. He studied her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Emily held his stare without flinching. Finally, Davis spoke. "Run the drill again." The recruits groaned inwardly, their muscles already screaming. Whitaker blinked. "Sir, you heard me," Davis said evenly. "Same mission, right now, and this time leave her." He pointed at Emily. Do not wake her. Do not interfere. Let her do exactly what she does. The recruits gaped. Sir, with respect, Whitaker began. That's an order, Davis cut in, his voice steel. No one argued after that. The horn blared again. Smoke filled the field. Blanks cracked, flares burst. The recruits scattered, dragging dummies, hearts pounding with rage and confusion. And Emily? She lay still, breathing softly, as if the world's chaos was no louder than a lullaby. Unbelievable, Rivera muttered as he hauled a dummy across the mud. She's making us fail again. But Davis didn't move. He stood at the edge of the field, arms folded, eyes fixed on Emily. The squad fought harder this time, furious energy driving them. Yet even with their effort, they fell short again. 19 minutes, 38 seconds. Still a failure. The recruits collapsed in frustration, spitting curses. Rivera turned, jabbing a finger toward Emily. See? She's dead weight. She'll never make it. But Davis wasn't looking at Rivera. He was still watching Emily, the sleeping recruit who hadn't stirred through the storm. To the squad, it looked like damning proof of her uselessness. To Davis, it was the opposite. He wasn't measuring speed or muscle. He was studying her composure in chaos. And what he saw was rare. That night, whispers filled the barracks. Recruits vented their fury. She's gonna get us thrown out. She's not cut out for this. Why is the commander protecting her? Emily lay in her bunk, listening in silence. The weight of their anger pressed against her chest, but she didn't break. She had expected this. What she hadn't expected was Commander Davis. Why had he intervened? Why had he ordered the drill to continue with her asleep? What had he seen that no one else did? As she closed her eyes, Emily thought of her father again. How he always said true strength wasn't about noise or speed, but about the moment when chaos finally struck. She didn't know it yet, but Davis understood that too. And he was waiting, silently, for the moment that would prove it to everyone else. Because a breaking point was coming. Not a drill. Not a test. Something real. And when it came, Emily. Parker would no longer be seen as the weakest recruit. She would be the one who stood unshaken, while others fell apart. The morning after the disastrous midnight drill, tension clung to the air like smoke after a fire. The recruits gathered on the parade field, bleary-eyed but rigid, boots clicking into place on command. The sun had barely crested the horizon, spilling pale light over the base, but their nerves buzzed sharper than coffee. Everyone knew something was different. Commander Davis stood at the front of the formation. He wasn't a man who wasted words. His presence alone carried weight, the kind that made even veteran instructors straighten their spines. His eyes, cold and assessing, swept over the rows of recruits until they landed on Emily Parker. Today, Davis began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the field. You will run the gauntlet again. Groans echoed softly down the line, quickly stifled when Sergeant Whitaker's glare swept through the ranks. The gauntlet was the toughest exercise on base, a relentless sequence of obstacles, simulated explosions, smoke screens, and timed objectives. Most dreaded it. Emily, however, simply stood still, face unreadable. Davis let silence linger before he continued. There will be one change. He paused, and his gaze sharpened on Emily. Parker will not be disturbed. Whatever she chooses to do, sleep, crawl, sit still, you will leave her. Murmurs rippled through the recruits, sharp and incredulous. Rivera's jaw clenched, his fists balling at his sides. With respect, sir, Whitaker interjected carefully. That will compromise the entire squad. Davis cut him off with a single look. That's an order, Sergeant. Whitaker swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, sir. The recruits exchanged dark glances as they were marched toward the training field. The message was clear. Whatever happened, Parker would be left alone. If she slept again, it would drag them all down, and this time, under the commander's direct watch, the gauntlet began with a blast. Sirens screamed. Smoke grenades hissed, cloaking the field. In gray, instructors fired blanks into the air, the crack and pop echoing like real gunfire. Go, go, go! Whitaker bellowed. The squad surged forward, vaulting over walls, dragging heavy dummies, crawling through mud as simulated mortar exploded around them. Adrenaline roared in their veins. Every second mattered. And Emily? She crouched near the starting point, tucked, her pack beneath her head, and closed her eyes. Unbelievable, Rivera spat, hauling a dummy with Jacobs. She's going to screw us all over again. Shut it and move, Jacobs barked back. But their frustration burned hotter with every obstacle. As they scrambled, gasping and coated in mud, Emily lay perfectly still, her chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. Around her, chaos, rage, smoke thickening, shouts echoing, explosions thundering, but she might as well have been in her childhood bedroom. Whitaker's face darkened as he watched, but he didn't intervene. Davis's order was absolute. The commander stood at the edge of the field, arms folded, eyes locked on Emily. He hadn't looked away since the drill began. Minutes dragged. The recruits fought harder, fueled by anger and humiliation. They were determined not to fail in front of Davis. Rivera cursed under his breath as his squad dragged a dummy through the mud, muscles screaming. We're killing ourselves while she's taking a nap. Jacobs gritted his teeth. Then, we'll prove we don't need her. The squad pushed with everything they had. They hit the final stretch with seconds to spare. Rivera sprinted across the finish, collapsing in the dirt, chest heaving. Jacobs fell beside him. The others stumbled. In, mud-streaked and panting, lungs on fire, the horn blared. 19 minutes, 55 seconds. They had finished under the time limit. Barely. A surge of pride coursed through the squad, but it was poisoned with bitterness. They had carried the mission without Emily, and she still curled near the stark row slowly, stretching as if she had enjoyed a peaceful nap. The recruits glared, fury etched in their faces. Rivera couldn't hold back. You're a damn disgrace, Parker, he snapped, standing with fists clenched. We bled for that mission while you slept. Again. Why the hell are you even here? Quiet, Rivera. Whitaker barked, but Davis lifted a hand. The field silenced instantly. The commander stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into the churned mud. He stopped in front of Emily, who stood calmly, her face unreadable, eyes steady. Why did you sleep, Recruit Parker? Davis asked, his tone even, not accusatory. Emily met his gaze. Because, sir, the chaos wasn't real. It was noise. I didn't need to waste my energy reacting to noise. Gasps rippled through the squad. No one spoke to a commander like that. Davis didn't flinch. And if it had been real? Her voice was calm, steady, almost quiet, but it carried. Then I wouldn't have slept, sir. I would have acted. The silence that followed was thick. The recruits exchanged bewildered looks, anger giving way to confusion. Whitaker's jaw tightened, but even he didn't speak. Davis studied her for a long moment, then turned to the squad. You think she's weak, he said, his voice cutting through the air. You think calm is the same as careless. But tell me, when the fire breaks out, when the real bullets fly, how many of you will still think clearly? How many of you will act without panic? No one answered. Davis's eyes swept the group. The hardest thing in combat isn't moving fast. It's staying calm. Panic kills more soldiers than bullets. He looked back at Emily, and she doesn't panic. The recruits shifted uncomfortably, their anger colliding with doubt. Dismissed, Davis said finally, his tone sharp. The squad marched off, muttering. Rivera shot Emily a glare as he passed, but it carried less certainty than before. Emily lingered for a moment, standing in the field alone. She had expected ridicule again, maybe even punishment. But instead, the commander had done something no one else had seen her. Not as lazy, not as weak, but as steady. She wasn't sure whether to feel vindicated or unsettled. Davis hadn't praised her, not really. He had simply exposed her to everyone else, leaving them to decide what it meant. As she walked back toward the barracks, her father's words echoed in her mind. Prove them wrong. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to. What Emily didn't know was that Davis wasn't finished testing her. He hadn't intervened to protect her reputation. He had intervened because he was waiting for the day when her calmness would no longer be an oddity, but the very thing that saved lives. And that day was coming faster than anyone realized. The sun had just dipped behind the distant tree line, casting long shadows across the training compound. The recruits were exhausted, muscles sore, minds fraying after yet another relentless day of drills. The night was too quiet. Emily. Parker leaned back against her duffel, her eyes half closed, savoring a moment of stillness. Her squad moved around her, dragging equipment, checking gear, exhausted but alert. The chaos of drills was familiar. So was the calm that flowed through her. She had slept through so many simulated battles that even the sharpest alarms barely registered as anything more than background noise. Then came the unexpected. A sudden, piercing crack shattered the relative calm. At first, the recruits thought it was another exercise, another test. But the smell of smoke hit first, sharp and acrid. Within seconds, flames licked the side of a storage shed near the edge of the compound. Equipment stacked nearby began to ignite, the fire spreading quickly across dry fuel and canvas. "Fire! Fire! Get back!" shouted one recruit, panic threading his voice. Everyone froze for a fraction of a second, disbelief frozen on their faces. Then chaos erupted. Some tried to stomp out the flames. Others scrambled to drag nearby equipment away. Whistles blew, but the commands were drowned out by screams, sirens, and the crackle of fire consuming wood and plastic. Muddy boots slipped, and hands burned while recruits scrambled in confusion. Emily, still calm, sat up. She inhaled slowly, assessing the scene. She didn't panic. The fire wasn't out of control yet, but it would be in seconds if someone didn't act decisively. Pull the extinguishers. She called calmly, her voice cutting through the noise. Heads snapped toward her. A few recruits hesitated, unsure who had authority, unsure if this was another simulation. "The generator," Emily barked. "Someone disconnect it now before it sparks." Rivera froze, disbelief clear on his face. She's giving orders?" "Yes," Jacobs muttered. "And we're actually listening." Emily moved forward, scanning the field. She directed the squad with sharp, precise commands. "You, push that gear back. You, form a line on the east side. Don't crowd each other." Her calmness didn't just survive the fire, it organized it. Where panic would have scattered them, her presence created order. Her eyes flicked between the flames and the recruits, assessing risk with laser focus. Her hands were steady, her voice unwavering. Minutes felt like hours. Flames hissed and crackled, smoke filling the air. One recruit screamed as he stumbled over a hose, nearly falling into the blaze. Emily caught his arm without hesitation. "Steady, focus, breathe," she said firmly, pulling him back into safety. By now, most of the squad was moving as she instructed. They were functioning under her calm command, the fear that had gripped them moments before, replaced by clarity. Emily didn't shout or panic. She simply acted, and the others followed. Whitaker finally arrived, sweat streaming down his face pale, "What the hell?" he started, but then stopped, watching Emily coordinate the squad like a seasoned leader. Even Rivera, the first to mock her, moved with precision, obeying without hesitation. For the first time, he saw the truth. She had been underestimated, and he had been wrong. "Check the perimeter," Emily barked, pointing to the far side of the shed. "Someone, get the hoses ready. Keep the line tight." By now, the fire had consumed most of the loose equipment, but the quick action prevented it from reaching more critical areas. Sweat streamed down Emily's face, but her movements were effortless, purposeful. She didn't flinch from heat, smoke, or the panic of her squad. And then it happened, the moment that confirmed everything. The generator near the corner sparked violently, threatening to ignite a nearby fuel crate. Without hesitation, Emily ran across the field, ducking under smoke and heat, yanking the main switch off in one swift motion. Sparks hissed, and the generator coughed out its final flare, leaving the flames contained. The squad gasped. Even Whitaker's mouth hung open. Emily didn't pause. She continued directing, guiding the recruits to douse the remaining fire and secure the area. Within 10 minutes, the flames were controlled. Equipment was saved, no one injured, and the chaos transformed into order, all because one recruit had stayed calm while the rest panicked. Finally, Emily exhaled, lowering herself onto a nearby crate. Sweat streamed down her face, mud streaked her uniform, but her eyes were steady. She glanced at the squad, who were still catching their breath. "Good job," she said quietly, almost softly. Whitaker approached, his face pale and conflicted. "Parker, what? How?" His voice faltered. Emily shrugged, brushing mud from her sleeve. "I stayed calm. That's all, Sergeant." Commander Davis appeared behind Whitaker, his gaze sharp and unwavering. He had observed the entire scene from the edge of the compound, assessing every action. His eyes now rested on Emily with a mix of respect and approval. "Most people panic," Davis said, his voice carrying across the field. "Most people make mistakes under pressure. But she," he gestured to Emily, "remains calm. She acts decisively when it matters. That is not weakness. That is strength." Rivera swallowed hard, his earlier resentment replaced with awe. I didn't believe it," he admitted under his breath. Jacobs nodded slowly. "Neither did I." Whitaker remained silent, still processing the scene. For once, the drill sergeant had no words of anger, only the reluctant recognition that Emily had just saved them all. Emily felt something she rarely did, a sense of vindication. She had trained her body and mind to respond, not react. All those hours of conserving energy, all the silent patience through ridicule and whispers, it had been worth it. And Davis wasn't finished. "You will all remember this night," he said, voice steady and commanding. "Do not mistake chaos for real danger. Calm and clarity are your greatest tools." "And Recruit Parker," he continued, eyes locking with hers, "has just taught you a lesson you will never forget." Emily's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. She had never sought recognition. All she had ever wanted was to do what mattered when it mattered. Tonight, she had done that. The squad stood silently, some embarrassed, some humbled. Emily's reputation as the sleeping recruit had been shattered not by words, but by undeniable action. She had proven herself in the only way that counted, by rising when everything around her threatened to fall apart. For the first time, Emily felt a quiet pride swell in her chest. She had been underestimated, mocked, dismissed, but she had survived, she had led, and she had saved lives. And in that moment, she knew one truth more clearly than ever. Her calmness was not a weakness. It was a weapon. And everyone around her, from the squad to the instructors, even the legendary Commander Davis, had finally seen it. The fire was out. The smoke had cleared. The mud-slicked field was littered with scorched equipment and scattered training crops. The recruits stood panting, drenched in sweat and grime, trying to process what had just happened. But Emily Parker remained the stillest among them, standing upright despite the chaos, as if nothing had shaken her at all. Commander Davis had called the squad together near the edge of the field. His presence drew an immediate hush. Even Sergeant Whitaker, the grizzled drill instructor who had yelled at her for sleeping during every previous drill, now stood respectfully, mouth tight and silent. "Listen closely," Davis began, scanning the group. "Tonight wasn't a drill. It was a test of composure, leadership, and presence of mind. What you saw wasn't luck or coincidence. That young woman Emily Parker performed at a level many of you might never achieve." Whispers rippled through the squad. Eyes darted toward Emily. Some of the recruits, like Rivera, were still in shock. How had she, the same recruit who slept through drills and earned the nickname Sleeping Beauty, suddenly taken command and orchestrated a crisis response flawlessly? "Sir," Whitaker said cautiously, "if I may, she's exceptional, yes, but she's also unusual. We've all seen her behavior before. Sleeping during live fire exercises, refusing to push with the group." Davis didn't flinch. "That unusual behavior is exactly what makes her effective. Most recruits expend energy on fear, on panic, on reacting to stimuli that may or may not matter. Parker doesn't. She conserves energy, she observes, and when the moment demands action, she acts decisively and correctly." The recruits exchanged stunned glances. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Rivera opened his mouth to speak, but hesitated, realizing he didn't have words that could explain the contradiction he had just witnessed. "She stayed calm when everyone else panicked," Davis continued, his voice steady. "She assessed the situation in seconds, gave precise instructions, and prevented this fire from becoming a disaster. You think courage is about rushing in blindly? No. Courage, skill, and leadership are about knowing when to move and moving decisively when it matters." Emily's chest rose slowly. She had been trained to expect mockery, criticism, perhaps even dismissal, but never recognition like this. Yet she felt no arrogance, only a quiet pride. For once, someone had seen the strength in her stillness. Davis' eyes swept the recruits again. "Most of you will spend years trying to master calm under pressure. Tonight, you watched it in action. Take note, learn from it. This is the difference between panic and control, chaos and command." Jacobs, who had mocked Emily before, spoke first among the squad. I didn't believe her. Not once. I thought she was lazy, maybe even dangerous." He glanced at Emily, shame flickering across his face. I was wrong." Rivera, usually loud and confrontational, lowered his head. "Yeah, I didn't see it before. She didn't just sit there. She led us. She kept us alive." Emily felt the weight of their words. She had never sought approval, but it mattered in a strange way, this acknowledgement from those who had doubted her. Whitaker finally spoke, voice gruff but thoughtful. "I've yelled at recruits for sleeping through drills. I've threatened expulsions for the same. But tonight, Parker taught us a lesson. Maybe I've been wrong about what strength really is." Emily blinked, but said nothing. Words had never been her first tool. Action had always been. Davis stepped closer, standing beside her. "Parker, your ability to remain calm isn't a flaw. It's discipline. A trained mind and body working in sync. You've anticipated chaos, not reacted to it blindly. That's the hallmark of elite operators. You've done something tonight that many seasoned soldiers cannot control: your fear, assess risk, and act with precision under extreme stress." Emily nodded quietly. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, but firmly. The squad was silent, watching her. Some faces reflected admiration, some guilt, and some lingering disbelief. This was the recruit they had mocked, the one who slept through drills. And now, in front of a decorated Navy SEAL commander, she had proven herself superior, not through brute strength, speed, or loud aggression, but through calm and clarity. Davis addressed the squad again. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Leadership isn't measured by who yells the loudest. Strength isn't measured by who sweats the most. True effectiveness comes from control under pressure, from seeing clearly when others panic, and from acting decisively when it counts. Parker embodies that. Take note. Emily felt her cheeks warm slightly. She had never considered herself a leader. She had only relied on the skills her father had taught. Her observe, conserve energy, act when necessary. Tonight, those skills had made the difference. Rivera finally muttered, almost to himself, I get it now. Calm doesn't mean weak. Jacobs nodded, adding, yeah, calm doesn't mean careless. She's the strongest one here. Even Whitaker allowed a small nod of acknowledgement, though his pride kept him from saying more. Emily's thoughts drifted briefly. Her father's lessons had never been more real. Panic wastes energy. Calm gives clarity. Action at the right moment saves lives. She had lived those lessons countless times in drills, and now, in a real crisis, they had proven themselves. Commander Davis, observing her closely, gave the final word. Parker, you will continue to train, continue to lead quietly, and continue to demonstrate control under pressure. The rest of this unit will follow your example, whether they want to or not. And one day, when the stakes are higher, you will. Prove your calmness again. That is your strength, and it will make all the difference. Emily's heart beat steadily, a quiet reassurance in the aftermath of the chaos. She had never sought attention, never craved recognition, but this acknowledgement felt different. It wasn't about ego. It was validation that her methods, her calm, her patience mattered. The squad slowly absorbed the weight of the revelation. Emily was no longer a liability, no longer the sleeping beauty they had mocked. She was a model of composure, a demonstration of the most critical skill in combat, the ability to think clearly and act decisively while others faltered. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a sense of belonging, not because she had changed, but because others had finally recognized what she had always known. Strength isn't always loud, and courage isn't always obvious. Sometimes it is quiet, steady, and unshakable. Commander Davis glanced at her one final time before turning back to the group. Remember this, he said. Panic kills. Clarity saves. Never forget the lesson you learned tonight. Parker taught you that, whether you believed it or not. Emily Parker exhaled softly, the chaos of earlier replaced with quiet certainty. She had survived, she had led, and she had earned the respect of the people who had doubted her most. And the night's revelation had only just begun to reshape her world. The next morning, the training base felt different. The air was thick with humidity and anticipation, but something had shifted. Recruits moved through the compound with a new awareness. Conversations were quieter, respectful, and every glance toward Emily Parker now carried a hint of acknowledgement, curiosity mixed with admiration. Even Rivera, who had spent weeks mocking her, now trailed a little behind, watching her every move. He had tried to dismiss her calm as luck, but the fire had proven otherwise. He couldn't ignore the fact that her composure had saved them all. Emily herself noticed the change, but remained quietly focused. She didn't seek attention or attempt to show off. She simply continued to move with her usual deliberate calm, always alert, always calculating her next move. The confidence she had gained wasn't arrogance. It was steady certainty, honed by experience and validated by real-world results. The day began with a series of grueling drills. Obstacle courses, timed runs, tactical exercises. Most recruits gave their all, pushing their bodies to the limits. And Emily? She moved with precision, not haste. Each step, each movement, measured and efficient. Her muscles didn't scream in exhaustion. Her breathing remained steady. She was in control. Her squad, still processing the previous night's events, found themselves unconsciously following. Her lead, when chaos erupted during a mock assault, they instinctively turned to Emily for guidance. She didn't need to shout. A single nod, a single gesture, directed them more effectively than the instructor's barking commands. "Cover the left flank," she called calmly, pointing to a ridge. "Jacobs, keep your head low. Rivera, secure the perimeter." For the first time, Rivera obeyed without grumbling. He moved with purpose, following her instructions as if they were lifelines rather than suggestions. The other recruits mirrored him, suddenly trusting the one they had once dismissed. Whitaker watched. From the sidelines, arms crossed, jaw tight. The drill sergeant had seen plenty of recruits falter, but Emily's quiet command unsettled him in a new way. He recognized a rare quality, the ability to inspire obedience and focus without relying on fear or anger. Even Commander Davis, observing from the observation tower, allowed a faint, approving nod. Emily's emergence as a leader was subtle, almost invisible, but undeniable. By mid-afternoon, the squad faced a particularly complex drill, a simulated hostage scenario. Recruits were split into teams, tasked with rescuing a dummy hostage while avoiding alarms and enemy fire. Panic erupted almost immediately among several members of Emily's squad, their nerves fraying as the simulation intensified. But Emily remained unmoved. She crouched behind a barricade, scanning the environment, calculating the optimal path. "Jacobs, provide cover," she instructed softly. "Rivera, move left. Don't rush step by step. Follow my lead." The squad obeyed, hesitating only momentarily before their trust in Emily took over. They moved with precision, covering each other efficiently, avoiding mistakes that had plagued them in previous exercises. Whitaker, shouting from the sidelines, couldn't believe his eyes. They're actually listening. They're functioning like a single unit. Emily didn't shout or panic. Her calmness had become a catalyst, transforming their fear into focused action. By the end of the drill, her squad completed the mission flawlessly, faster than any other team on base. As they regrouped, the recruits who had once mocked her approached, hesitantly at first. Rivera stepped forward. I owe you an apology," he said, voice low but sincere. "I didn't believe you could do what you just did. You were right all along. Calm isn't weakness." Emily looked at him, eyes steady, voice gentle. "It's not about being right, Rivera. It's about staying focused when it matters." Jacobs nodded. "We've been wrong to judge you. You're a real leader, Emily." Even Whitaker approached, a rare softness in his expression. "You've earned the respect of your squad, Parker. Don't waste it. Lead well." Emily nodded quietly, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. She didn't crave their respect, but she realized that earning it through action was far more meaningful than any words could convey. As the week progressed, Emily's leadership became more apparent. Recruits began turning to her naturally during exercises, not just in moments of crisis, but even during mundane tasks, equipment checks, formation drills, navigation exercises. Her calm presence instilled confidence, allowing others to perform beyond their perceived limits. During a night navigation exercise, the squad had to traverse a dense forest using only maps, compasses, and the dim light of moon and headlamps. Most teams faltered, losing their bearings, voices rising in panic. Emily's squad, however, moved methodically. She guided them quietly, offering instructions only when necessary, allowing each member to act, but maintaining oversight. By the end, they emerged from the forest with minimal mistakes. The other squads stared in awe. For the first time, Emily wasn't just a recruit. They recognized her as the anchor, the strategist, the one who could lead without ever needing to assert dominance. Even the instructors began to speak differently about her. No longer the sleeping beauty, Emily Parker had become a symbol of precision, calm, and resilience. Discussions in the mess hall shifted from mockery to admiration. "She's different," one recruit admitted. "Not because she's strong, but because she doesn't panic." "Yeah," another agreed. "I don't even want to admit it, but I'd follow her anywhere right now." Emily, however, remained unchanged. She didn't seek their admiration or validation. Her focus was singular: the mission, the task, the goal. Recognition was incidental, a byproduct of her actions, not a motivator. Commander Davis continued to watch closely. He recognized a rare transformation not just in Emily, but in the squad itself. Her calmness and quiet decisiveness had not only revealed her own strength, but had elevated everyone around her. She had become a force multiplier. By remaining unshaken, she allowed others to perform better than they thought possible. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the training grounds, Davis approached Emily while the squad was resting. "You've done more than survive here," he said quietly, his voice carrying no judgment, only observation. "You've taught others to be better. That is rare. That is leadership, and that is why you will continue to grow. And one day, you will lead in ways that will save lives." Emily nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. She didn't feel pride in the conventional sense, but a quiet acknowledgement that her approach her calm, measured patience was not just valid, it was essential. The squad had changed as well. What had once been tension, ridicule, and mistrust now simmered into respect and cautious admiration. Emily's emergence as a leader was no longer questioned. It was a quiet truth, undeniable in every action and decision she took. By the end of that week, she was no longer Sleeping Beauty. She was Parker, steady, precise, and unwavering. She had become more than a recruit. She had become a model of leadership, demonstrating that strength is not always loud, that courage does not always roar, and that calmness under pressure can transform chaos into order. For Emily Parker, the journey was far from over. But she had emerged from doubt and ridicule into clarity, from silence into influence, and from being underestimated to being recognized as a true leader among her peers. The final week of training had arrived, the culmination of months of grueling drills, sleepless nights, and unrelenting pressure. Every recruit knew this week would decide who graduated and who would be sent home. The tension in the air was palpable, and even the seasoned instructors seemed sharper, their eyes tracking every move with clinical precision. Emily Parker stood at the edge of the training field, her pack slung lightly over her shoulder, her boots coated in mud, and her uniform streaked with sweat. She had spent weeks earning the respect of her squad and the recognition of Commander Davis. Yet she knew that this week, the ultimate test would demand more than calm observation. It would demand action. The instructors had devised a final exercise, unlike anything they had attempted before. A full-scale simulated mission, combining navigation, combat, hostage rescue, and survival under extreme stress. Smoke grenades, explosives, and timed obstacles would simulate every possible danger. The twist: Emily's squad would have to rely entirely on their own judgment and leadership to succeed. Instructors would interfere only if lives were truly at risk. As the horn blared, chaos erupted immediately. Explosions rattled the field, fires ignited in several zones, and simulated gunfire cracked through the air. Recruits scattered, some panicking, others frozen. Emily crouched behind cover, assessing the terrain. She didn't move first. She didn't panic. Instead, she scanned, calculated, and plotted the squad's approach. Every recruit in her team, Rivera, Jacobs, and the others looked to her instinctively, seeking guidance in the storm of simulated danger. "Move to the left flank," Emily instructed, her voice calm, firm, and clear. "Jacobs, cover. Rivera, secure the perimeter. Step by step. Don't rush." They obeyed immediately. For the first time, the squad moved as a single unit, there. Actions coordinated, deliberate, precise. Emily's calm presence transformed chaos into strategy. But the instructors weren't done. Explosions intensified, artificial smoke thickened, and alarms blared continuously. One obstacle required the squad to navigate a narrow, debris-strewn ridge over a trench filled with simulated fire. Several recruits hesitated, eyes wide with fear. Emily stepped forward. "Follow me. Watch your footing. Focus on each step." Her voice carried authority without arrogance. They followed, trembling but steady. Rivera stumbled once, but Emily caught his arm, guiding him safely across. Every step, every decision, reinforced the trust her squad had learned to place in her. The mission escalated further. A hostage had been captured and moved to a distant location. A squad needed to infiltrate enemy lines, neutralize simulated threats, and extract the hostage all while avoiding detection and completing the objective within the time limit. Most squads had failed this portion of the exercise in previous years. Panic, noise, and confusion usually led to missed deadlines, errors, and simulated casualties. Emily's squad, however, moved with unprecedented cohesion. She directed them silently at times, using subtle gestures, and at other times with crisp, concise orders. The team navigated the simulated minefield, scaled walls, and approached the enemy camp without a single misstep. Every movement was calculated, every choice deliberate. Finally, they reached the hostage location. 2 recruits were positioned to guard the entrance, while Emily coordinated entry. Smoke grenades hissed, lights flashed, alarms screamed, but she remained unshaken. With a precise, fluid series of commands, she led the squad inside, neutralized threats, and secured the hostage. The moment felt surreal. The squad had completed an exercise that had defeated dozens of previous groups. They had done so flawlessly, under extreme simulated danger. The final stretch required extraction under fire. The squad carried the hostage across open terrain while avoiding simulated gunfire and obstacles. Most recruits faltered. Some stumbled, losing control. Emily remained steady, guiding them step by step, correcting mistakes with calm authority, offering reassurance instead of criticism. By the time they reached the extraction point, the squad was exhausted but intact. No one had been lost or injured, and the mission had been completed in record time. Silence fell across the field as instructors and observers, including Whitaker and Commander Davis, studied the squad. The enormity of their success, particularly under Emily's guidance, was undeniable. Davis stepped forward, voice carrying. Across the field. Today, you have witnessed the difference between chaos and control, panic and precision. You have witnessed the emergence of true leadership. He turned to Emily. Recruit Parker, your calmness, your assessment, and your ability to act decisively have not only saved your squad, but you have elevated every member of it. You have proven that leadership is not about noise, aggression, or speed. It is about clarity, control, and timing. Emily's chest rose slowly. She didn't feel the thrill of victory. She felt something quieter. Affirmation. Years of training, countless drills, and months of ridicule had led to this moment. Her approach, her patience, her calm was no longer misunderstood. It was recognized as indispensable. Whitaker, standing beside Davis, finally spoke, voice low but firm. "I've been wrong to judge her. Parker isn't lazy. She isn't careless. She is everything we hope for in a leader. Calm, decisive, capable." Rivera, Jacobs, and the others approached Emily, a mixture of exhaustion, awe, and respect written on their faces. I didn't believe it," Rivera admitted. "But you are right. Calm isn't weakness. It's strength." Jacobs nodded. "You led us through chaos and didn't panic. We wouldn't have made it without you." Emily simply nodded. She didn't seek accolades. She never had. But for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the quiet satisfaction of true accomplishment. Commander Davis concluded the ceremony. "Let this be a lesson to everyone here. Panic kills. Clarity saves. Calm is not a weakness. It is a weapon. And Parker has demonstrated it today better than anyone." Emily's squad, once doubtful, once mocking, now stood proud beside her. The nickname Sleeping Beauty had vanished, replaced with respect, trust, and recognition. She had transformed from the recruit who slept through drills into a leader capable of guiding others through the most extreme challenges. The final week ended with graduation exercises, each squad performing under observation. Emily's team excelled consistently, their cohesion and efficiency a testament to her influence. Instructors praised the squad, but they specifically highlighted Parker as the linchpin of their success. Later, as Emily stood quietly, watching her squad celebrate, Commander Davis approached. "You've done something rare, Parker," he said softly. "You've taught your peers and yourself that strength is more than muscle or noise. It is steadiness, observation, and decisive action. That is the mark of a leader. Remember it, and never underestimate what you bring to the field." Emily nodded, eyes steady. "Thank you, sir," she replied quietly, but her voice carried the weight of everything she had endured and achieved. As the sun set over the base, Emily Parker finally felt a sense of belonging and accomplishment. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and seemingly insurmountable challenges. She had proven herself not just to others, but to herself. Calm, patient, and decisive, she had emerged as the recruit who would inspire others and lead when it mattered most. And from that day forward, she would never again be underestimated. The legend of the recruit who slept through drills but rose when it truly counted was complete.